Hey, welcome back, folks, to Max Nave Horsemanship. I'm really glad you could be with me today because I've got a hot topic today. And I was actually just on this horse today, first time in a long time, actually. And it kind of inspired me to do this because, well, for those of you that have watched any number of my videos, you'll know I ride in a halter. I don't use a bit. Now, today's topic is going to be bit versus bitless, but it's not going to be what you think. And it's a topic that I've avoided for a very long time because it is quite controversial, usually starts arguments, things like that. So I'm not going to really debate a lot of the usual things you hear. The usual arguments are you need a bit to get control of the horse as far as pro bit, and for bitless, it's generally being kind to the horse. Usually humane and humane reasons, that sort of thing. You want to be fair, gentle. Yeah. Well, I do that anyhow, so that's not one of my reasons. I'm going to tell you what my reasons are, and they might come as a little bit of a surprise because they're entirely practical, and partly because I'm cheap and maybe even a tiny bit lazy. And well, by riding in a halter, you can save an awful lot of money. So there's the cheap part. I mean, minimum $300 you can save, depending on what kind of a reins and bridle arrangement you have. It can be a lot more than that. But before we get carried away, this is the very horse that taught me I don't need to use a bit. And I'm going to give you a little bit of her backstory here so that you know how this all came about. She's a very smart and very sensitive horse. When I first got her, she actually came with what is referred to as a twisted wire bit, snaffle bit, which I thought was way too harsh for what she needed, being as sensitive as she was. I immediately switched to a smooth snaffle, but it wasn't long after that. I'd only had her a couple months, and she'd always been a little bit of a handful. Go back, she was young and green, okay, when I first got her. She's been around a long time now, but she was very young and green at the time, and half Arab. And back then I thought that was a real bad combination. But after a couple of months, it was getting into winter. And for those of you that don't know, where I live, well, we can have below freezing temperatures for, well, half the year. It's not unusual at all to have cold temperatures. Now, and when I say cold, this is relative, okay? Compared to where you come from, might not be that cold. But around here, you can be easily below freezing for at least half the year. And during the extremes of winter, it can be minus 20, minus 30, even as cold as minus 40, although that's rare. Usually when it gets down to minus 20, I probably don't want to ride anyhow, so that's not much of an issue. But a lot of people around here, they'll actually forgo riding for half the year because of the temperatures. Now, I'm not super keen on riding. It doesn't have to happen. The more I get to know horses, the less I care if I ride. I can get a lot of enjoyment just being with them. As you can see, the relationship we've got, it's pretty good. And but right from the beginning, I just thought, this putting a hunk of metal in their mouth in the winter just doesn't sound like a good idea, because up to that point, I was already, I'd put the bit up on the defroster in the car to warm it up, and then I'd stick it in the armpit of my coat, and by the time I got it in her mouth, it was already cold. And I thought, if it gets any colder, this is going to be terrible. She's going to be getting frostbite in her mouth. The thing's going to act like a heat sink and draw the heat out of her mouth and all this stuff. I just can't see I just can't see that being a good thing. And I didn't want to forego riding for half the year. So my alternative was, I guess I'm going to have to figure out whether or not we can ride in a halter. Now, this goes back a few years, and at that time, that was a pretty new idea, riding bitless. And in these parts, things are different in different places. A bitless halter, or bridle I should say, bitless bridle was pretty much unheard of, and you couldn't buy them locally. At that point you could get them online, but locally none of the stores had them. So I thought, well, the only option is a halter. And I was using clip-on reins, so I just clipped them onto the halter and thought, this is probably not going to end well, because I'm still to this day not a particularly great rider, and like I said, at that time she was quite young and green and half Arab, and I thought, oh, this is not going to go well. This is not going to end well at all. But as it turned out, she was much happier and better behaved in a halter than she ever was with a bit. And that was kind of the beginning, and I never looked back. Now, taking it a step further, I had somebody say to me one time, oh, you couldn't ride my horse in a halter because it's too hot. You got to use a bit. Well, you know what? My opinion on that is if you can't ride your horse in a halter, you probably shouldn't ride it at all. This thing here, she understands it. She knows all the commands. So bottom line is, if you can get absolutely everything you need out of a halter, you just don't need to progress. I want to share a couple other things too. Of course, being the lazy guy that I am, once I've caught my horse, I don't want to have to either take the halter off to put the bridle on or put a bridle over top of the halter, mess with reins, all that stuff. It's more stuff to carry, more stuff to put on the horse. Forget it. All I got to do is take the other end of my lead rope, tie it onto the bridle, well, halter, and it becomes a bridle. Just like that. See? Simple as that. I now have the equivalent of roper reins. Simple as that. And then, of course, we've covered the practical. We've covered the I'm lazy a little bit. Actually, it's not that I'm lazy. I'm realistic. I don't believe in doing extra work if I don't have to. So we got that part down, and then we've got the financial part now. Financially, this halter and lead, prices vary a little bit, but 30, 40 bucks. Now if you want to buy a bit, which the choices are overwhelming, even individual manufacturers, there's hundreds to choose from. If you start looking at all the different ones that are available, there's literally thousands. So you got your bit, but you got to figure out what you need. A bridle, you got to figure out what you need. And then a set of reins, you're looking at about 300 bucks minimum. And it can go up from there. So there's your financial. You're going to save about 300 bucks. I'm going to save time. I've always got a halter and lead with me. If I want to stop and rest, I can tie the horse up, whatever I want to do. And there's just no reason for anything else. It's as simple as that. So do you need anything besides a halter? Do you need a bit? Well, some people will argue that you do. But there's also a lot of people that mistakenly think that going bitless means you're being nice to the horse. Fact of the matter is there's a lot of different types of bitless bridles out there. And honestly, most of them I don't like. Some of them are actually really nasty, and they're probably just as bad or worse than a bit. Like I've said before, your hands are the biggest key. How gentle you are with those reins, whether you got a bit or you're connected to a halter, same thing. You do things the same way, and if you can achieve what you want without getting in a fight with a horse using a halter, there's absolutely no reason to use a bit. Simple as that. So it's practical. I'm lazy and I'm cheap. That's why we do it. It's got nothing to do with morality or humanity or being nice to the horse, because quite frankly, just because you don't have a bit does not mean you're being nice to the horse. Some of the bitless bridles are not very nice. In fact, there's very few that I would actually approve of, but we won't go there. That'd be a video for another day, and maybe when I got a whole bunch of bridles around that I can demonstrate on. And well, the odds of finding all the right ones that I can borrow to show you, slim. So anyhow, in the meantime, have a nice day. And remember, if you can't ride your horse in the halter, maybe you shouldn't be riding. Go back to basics. That's why I'm as thorough as I am, so that by the time I get on the horse, it fully understands everything it needs to know. And there's absolutely no need for progression past that. So have a good day, folks.